When the clock on my dashboard ticked closer to the deadline, I realized my freedom was slipping away. The judge gave me exactly 3 minutes to step into the courtroom or lose my child forever. My 6-year-old daughter, Maisie, sat quietly in the back seat, completely unaware that this morning ride would determine the rest of our lives. If things went well today, we would never have to return to the house of my parents. My name is Joanna Vance, and at 28 years old, I learned that biology does not guarantee safety. This custody battle was not against my former husband, who had vanished years ago and signed away his rights. Instead, my own parents, Arthur and Beverly, secretly filed legal paperwork to claim guardianship of my daughter. They did not do this out of love, but because they could no longer control my life. For 8 grueling months, I collected every bank statement, medical report, and school record to prove my fitness as a mother. All those documents rested inside a heavy folder on the passenger seat next to me. The previous evening, my mother entered my bedroom without an invitation and offered a final warning. She told me that if I stayed, they would forget everything, but I refused to compromise my peace. Breakfast that morning was terrifyingly normal as my father read the newspaper while my mother cooked. My younger sister Cassidy avoided eye contact entirely, which should have been my first warning sign. When Maisie and I finally left, my mother stood on the porch waving while Cassidy was nowhere to be found. We drove 4 miles before I pressed the brakes at an intersection, and the pedal sank completely to the floor. Panic surged through my chest as the vehicle refused to slow down for the red light. I steered into an abandoned construction entrance, scraping against a wire fence before crashing into a massive pile of dirt. Tears streamed down my face as my daughter asked why I was crying. Outside the car, I noticed dark fluid leaking onto the gravel and realized someone had deliberately sabotaged my vehicle. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with 2 text messages that confirmed my worst fears. The first message was from Cassidy, mocking me by asking if I checked my brakes before driving. The second text came from my mother, stating that I would never leave them alive. My breath caught in my throat as a pickup truck pulled into the dirt lot, and a man in a safety vest stepped out. The man introduced himself as Silas and immediately inspected the damage beneath my engine. He pointed out that the hose did not burst naturally, but was cleanly sliced with a sharp tool. Silas wanted to call the highway patrol immediately, but I pleaded with him because waiting meant missing court. After I explained the urgency of the custody hearing, he offered to drive us in his truck. The courthouse clerk called my phone to warn me that the judge was already starting the session. Silas checked his watch and promised we could make it within 22 minutes if we hurried. As we drove, Cassidy sent photographs of my belongings scattered across the wet grass outside their house. They knew we survived the crash, and their desperation was growing more dangerous by the minute. We arrived at the parking lot with only 4 minutes remaining on the clock. My parents and Cassidy stood on the courthouse steps, looking deeply disappointed to see me alive. My father walked over to the truck window and calmly told me that I made a mistake by bringing 1 witness. He gestured toward 3 strangers who were preparing to testify falsely against my character. Silas told me to remain calm and let the truth speak for itself as we entered the building. The hallway was filled with strangers, making the reality of my situation feel incredibly overwhelming. When the bailiff called my name, my legs trembled, but Maisie held my hand to give me strength. Inside the courtroom, the paid witnesses immediately began delivery of their fabricated stories about my parenting. The judge looked at me with strict attention and demanded to know why I arrived late. The opposing attorney tried to object, but I explained that my lateness became relevant because someone cut my brake lines. I handed my phone to the bailiff so the judge could review the threatening messages. The entire courtroom fell silent as the judge demanded to know if my mother sent those texts. Before my mother could construct a lie, the rear doors opened and Silas walked inside with a police officer. They carried a sealed evidence bag containing the sliced section of my brake line. The officer announced that a preliminary inspection confirmed intentional sabotage and that fingerprints were recovered from the scene. Cassidy turned pale and gripped the table as the investigation unraveled in front of everyone. The officer then revealed security footage from a nearby convenience store showing Cassidy underneath my car early that morning. Cassidy stood up in panic and began a confession before cutting herself off too late. The police also recovered a utility knife from the family home that still had fresh brake fluid on the blade. My heart broke because this was the sister I had protected for many years. The judge turned his focus to Maisie and gently asked where she felt the most safe. My daughter did not hesitate and answered that she felt safest with her mother. When asked about her time at the house of her grandparents, she explained that she had to remain completely quiet. She also mentioned that she disliked the shouting of her uncle, confirming the toxic environment. The judge closed the legal file and announced that the petition for guardianship was officially denied. He noted a disturbing pattern of intimidation and declared that we were completely free to live anywhere. The evidence of the crime was forwarded to criminal authorities for immediate prosecution. My father tried to argue that we were still family, but the judge stated that family is not a license to destroy lives. Outside the building, the storm clouds parted and Silas congratulated us before we departed. I looked at my damaged vehicle on the tow truck and realized something profound. If the brakes had failed on the open highway instead of the dirt lot, we might not have survived. The mechanical failure did not ruin our lives, but rather exposed the danger and saved our future. 2 months later, Maisie and I moved into a peaceful townhouse located 3 counties away. The walls were cream-colored, and we had a small kitchen where we could make breakfast together without fear. On our first evening, my daughter smiled and expressed relief that nobody knew our new address. Locking the door that night brought a sense of absolute security that I had never experienced before. People often ask if I harbor hatred toward my family, but I choose to focus on protection instead. My sister thought she was preventing my departure, but she only proved why leaving was completely necessary. Every time my daughter laughs in our quiet home, I am reminded of our survival. Escaping that toxic environment was not the conclusion of our narrative, but the true beginning of our lives.